Charlotte Doyle, Chapter 17. His face appeared to be floating in air. Terrified, I could only stare into his hollow and unseeing eyes, for so they seemed in the flickering light. "Is that you, Charlotte?" came a voice. His voice. "What are you?" I managed to ask. The head drew closer. "Don't you know me?" the voice said. I stammered. Are you real?" "Charlotte, don't you see me?" came the voice, more insistent than before. Now the light, it was a small candle, was held up and I could see more of him. The very image of Zachariah, but sadly altered too. In life he had never appeared strong or large. In death he became shriveled and gray-bearded. "What do you want?" I demanded, shrinking back in the furthest corner of the brig. "To help you," the voice said. But you died," I whispered. "I saw your funeral. They wrapped you in a hammock and they dropped you into the sea." A soft laugh. His laugh. "Close to death, surely, Charlotte, but not altogether dead. Come, touch me. See for yourself." Cautiously, I moved forward and reached out and touched his hand. Real flesh and warmth. "And the hammock?" I wondered in astonishment. He laughed again. "A full hammock, to be sure, but empty of me. It's an old sailor's trick. No doubt if I remained in Jaggery's hands, I would have died." "Have you been in the hold all along?" "Ever since." I could only stare. "Keach brings me food and water every day. The food's not as good as I would have prepared, but it's enough to keep me alive. Look here, Charlotte, if poor Cranach could hide, why not Zachariah? It was Keach's notion." "Why wasn't I told?" "It was decided not to tell you." "Why?" "You forget, Charlotte, you informed upon us." "That was then Zachariah," I said, my face burning. "True enough, and I've been told about you, your young soul of justice. That's much to be admired. I salute you." "I wanted to fill your place." He smiled. "Didn't I once say how much we were like? A prophecy. But you're not regretting I'm alive, are you?" "Oh, no, of course not. But if I hadn't caught sight of you during the storm, would I have ever seen you?" "I cannot say." "The captain might have discovered you then. Why did you come up?" "What'd be the point of staying here and perishing when I could have been of help?" "You saved me from falling." "One shipmate helps another." "But what about Captain Jaggery?" I asked. "Does he know you're here?" "Now, Charlotte, do you think if he believed me alive he'd allow me here for even one moment? Do you?" "I suppose not," I admitted. "There you are. That's all the proof I need that he doesn't know. The hope is this," he went on. "When the Seahawk reaches Providence, not very long from now, I understand, you shall see Jaggery will keep the crew on board, not wanting them to talk to anyone. But I'll be able to get off. And when I do, I'll go to the authorities to expose him for what he is. Now, what do you think?" Even as I grasped the plan, I felt a pang of embarrassment that compelled me to turn away. "What's the matter?" The pain in my heart made it impossible for me to speak. "Tell me," he coaxed. "Zachariah?" "What?" You're a black man." "Oh, that I am. But the state of Rhode Island, where we're going, it has no more slaves." He suddenly checked himself. "Or am I wrong?" "A black man, Zachariah, a common sailor, testifying against a white officer." I didn't have the heart to finish. "Ah, but Charlotte, didn't you once tell me that it was your father who's part of the company that owns the Seahawk?" "You did. The plan is to go to him. You'll give me a good character, won't you? And if he's like you, there's nothing to fear." A tremor of unease passed through me. I wasn't sure what to say. I stole a glance at him. "What about Cranach?" I asked. "Did he die, truly?" "More's the pity," he said with a shake of his head and a lapse into silence, and then he looked up. "Now then," he said, "I have talked too much of myself. I saw Barlow bring you here and lock you in. Did you mock Jaggery again?" I was taken aback. Didn't anyone tell you? Tell me what? Zachariah, Mr. Hollybrass was murdered. Murdered, he cried. When? During the storm. I wasn't told. Why not? I cannot imagine. He grew thoughtful and even glanced toward the ladder. Then abruptly he turned back to me and said, But what's that got to do with you? Zachariah, it's the reason I'm here. The captain has accused me. You? Again he seemed surprised. I nodded. But surely, Charlotte, you did nothing of the kind. He looked around. Or did you? No. Then there's no more to be said. I shook my head. Zachariah, I went on, the crew seems to side with Jaggery, to think that it was me. Oh, I can't believe that, he exclaimed. Zachariah, it's true. He gazed at me in perplexity. Now it's my turn to ask, why? The murder was done with the dirk that you gave me. Well, what proof is that? Someone must have taken it from your things in the forecastle. Zachariah, when I moved to the forecastle, I left it in my cabin. Well, then, of course, you have nothing to do with it. They don't believe that I left it there. Charlotte, you're not given to lies, he said. When you first saw me, Zachariah, did you think that I would ever go before the mast? No. Or climb into the rigging during a storm? Not at all. Well, then, why shouldn't I have murdered Mr. Hollybrass as well? I'm sure that's the way they're all thinking. My words silenced him for a few moments. His face clouded. But instead of commenting, he stood up. I have a store of food and water here. I'll get some. Securing the candle to a plank, he moved into the darkness. I watched him go, puzzled and troubled by his reaction to what I'd said. While he appeared genuinely surprised, it seemed impossible that he hadn't been told. And indeed, as he vanished into the gloom, a ghastly notion began to fill my head. Perhaps it was Zachariah who killed Mr. Hollybrass. No doubt he would have killed the captain, given the chance. As for the first mate, had Zachariah done it to strike fear into Captain Jaggery? The very idea was loathsome to me, and yet my racing mind began to construct an entire conspiracy. The crew, knowing Zachariah was alive, might have guessed, perhaps, knew for a certainty that he had done the crime, but would not acknowledge it. Now, with the captain accusing me, they were being asked to choose between me and Zachariah, their old comrade. A decision on their part to defend him would be understandable, and would go far to explain why they abandoned me. But before I could puzzle out my thoughts, Zachariah returned with a jug of water and hardtack loaf. Mealy as the bread was, I was glad to have it. Do you wish to be free of here? He asked, nodding toward my cage. It's locked. A sailor knows his ship, he said slyly. And reaching toward the back of the brig, he pulled 2 bars out from what I now realized were rotten sockets. Come along, he said, but be ready to bolt in if anyone comes. I did so, and we sat side by side, our backs against a barrel in the flickering candlelight. Zachariah, I said, the captain said he's going to bring me to trial. Do you think he means to do it? That's his right. And if he holds trial, what'll happen? He'll be the judge and the jury, and he'll find you guilty. And then? I asked, and when Zachariah didn't answer, I said, Tell me. I can't believe he'd go far as to hang me. His silence was answer enough. For a while we both remained silent. Zachariah, I said, I need to know. Did anyone else besides me see you during the storm? I exchanged words. With whom? Does it make a difference? Maybe. And he considered. Fisk, he said after a moment, and Keach. Then it's likely the entire crew knew you came up. It's possible, he said, with a sudden frown. Had he read my mind? Zachariah, I said softly, it's bound to be one of your mates who killed Hollybrass. Charlotte, he said with a sigh, that's true. Every one of them might have a good reason. But look here, once we discover who it is, we can decide what to do. I kept glancing sidelong at him, trying to read his mind, more and more convinced that it was he who was the murderer. Still, I lacked the courage to ask. "Tell me all you know," he said. I related what little I could, from the discovery of Mr. Hollybrass's body to Captain Jaggery's accusation. My words made him even more thoughtful. "Charlotte," he said finally, "that dirk. Did you tell anyone else you had it?" I cast my mind back. "Shortly after you gave the blade to me," I recalled, "I wanted to give it back, remember? Zachariah, when you refused to take it, I offered it to the captain." He turned around sharply. "But why?" "I was afraid of it. And you." "Still?" "Oh, no. But then I was." "Did you tell him where you got it?" I shook my head. It's not like him to let the matter go. He must have demanded an answer. "He did." "And?" I made one up. "Did he believe it?" "I thought so." "What followed?" "He said I should keep it and place it under my mattress." "And did you?" "Yes." "Did anyone else know you had it?" I thought hard. "Dillingham." "What about him?" "When I was going to give it back to you, I was holding it in my hand. Dillingham saw it. I know he did. And if he told others," Zachariah mused out loud, "then there's not a soul aboard who could not know of it." The moment he said it, I knew he was right. And I remembered something else. Zachariah also told me to put it under my mattress. I glanced around and caught him stealing a sidelong look at me. "Zachariah, I didn't kill Hollybrass. I was aloft when it happened. And when I went aloft, it was the captain who gave me a knife to use. I didn't even have one." "What happened to the one he gave you?" "I lost it." He grunted, neither yes or no. Once more, I would taste my accusation of him on my tongue. Even as I thought it, the candle gutted and went out. The darkness seemed to swallow my ability to talk. But Zachariah talked, a sudden and surprising torrent, dark tales about each member of the crew. Every jack of them, he claimed, had run afoul of the law at some time or other. Not mere snitch thieves or cutpurses either. Some were true felons. More compelling than what he said was what he did not say. The more Zachariah talked, the more convinced I was that his rambling chatter was meant to keep us from the crucial question: who killed Mr. Hollybrass? And the more the question was avoided, the more certain I was that it was he. But how could I accuse him? The captain would have to know that he was alive, and the knowledge would mean Zachariah's certain death. Also, it would mean the end of the crew's plan, which required Zachariah for bringing Captain Jaggery to justice. No wonder I couldn't ask him the question. I did not want to know. A noise startled me. I felt Zachariah's hand on my arm. A warning. A shaft of light dropped into the darkness. I could see the cargo hatch on deck had been pulled open. In moments, we heard someone on the ladder. I scurried back into the brig. Zachariah hastened to close the bars. Then he retrieved his water jug and disappeared from my side. I did not know where. I looked toward the ladder and I saw Captain Jaggery descending slowly. He carried a lantern and had a pistol tucked in his belt. When he reached the foot of the ladder, he paused and looked about, as if making an inspection of the hold. Finally, he approached the brig, and there he lifted the lantern and scrutinized me as if I were some thing. It was a look filled with hatred, such as I've never seen before or since. Its clear, precise intensity given greater force by his state of personal disorder, his unkempt hair, his dirty face, the trembling muscle along his jaw. At last he said, "Miss Doyle, to have murdered a shipmate and officer is a capital offense. The penalty for such an act is death by hanging. Let me assure you a trial is not required, the evidence being altogether clear. I have the right to sentence you without a trial. But I insist that you have your fairness. It shall not be me who judges you. I'm not such a fool as that. No, the judgment will be made by those who you have taken as your equals, your shipmates." So saying, he undid the padlock on the brig and pulled the gate open. "So be it, Miss Doyle. Your trial commences." Charlotte Doyle, Chapter 18. When I emerged on deck from the dark hold, the very perfection of the day, bright sun, dazzling blue sky, clouds both full and white, made me shade my eyes. And though the Seahawk pitched and rolled gently upon the softest of seas, I felt as though my legs would give way under me. For when I was able to look about, I saw the captain had arranged a kind of a courtroom. In the ship's waist, on the starboard side, he had assembled the crew into 2 rows, some sitting on the deck, the rest standing behind the front rank. Before them, atop the central cargo hatch, a chair had been placed. The captain hurried me past the crew, none of whom would look me in the eye, and instructed me to sit in the chair, saying it would serve as the prisoner's dock. Now he took his place in one of his fine cabin chairs. It had been set up high behind the quarterdeck rail, a rail that he pounded sharply with the butt of his pistol. "I proclaim this court to be in session in strict accordance with the law," he said. "Considering the overwhelming evidence against the accused, it needn't be held at all. But as I have told Miss Doyle, she will enjoy the benefit of my generosity." So saying, he now took up his Bible, and though he had just seated himself, rose abruptly and brought it down to the crew. It was Fisk he approached first. "Place your hand upon this," he demanded. Fisk did as he was ordered, but clearly unnerved, he touched the book as one might touch a hot plate. "Do you, Mr. Fisk," the captain intoned, "swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" Fisk hesitated. He glanced quickly at me. "Do you?" Captain Jaggery pressed. "Yes," Fisk replied finally in a hollow whisper. Satisfied, the captain went on to the next man, and then the next, until he had sworn in the entire crew. From the solemnity that showed upon their faces, and from the nervous fidgets in the downcast eyes, it was clear to me the men were mightily unsettled by the oath that they had been made to take. They could not take the Bible lightly. But I was certain each of them believed, as I did, that the murder was done by Zachariah, whom they themselves had conspired to hide in the hold. It was to him they would remain steadfast, not me. They would tell the truth, but in such a way as to protect Zachariah. And how could I disagree? Once again, Captain Jaggery had sworn in the crew. He approached me. I, too, laid my hand on the Bible. I, too, promised to tell the truth, even as I knew I would not speak it completely. The swearing done, the captain returned to his chair and again banged his pistol on the rail. "Will the accused stand?" he said. I stood. "Before this court," he continued, "I, Andrew Jaggery, by my rightful authority as master of the Seahawk, charge you, Charlotte Doyle, with the unnatural murder of Samuel Hollybrass, late of Portsmouth, England, the first mate on the Seahawk. Miss Doyle, how plead you?" "Captain Jaggery," I tried to protest. "How plead you, Miss Doyle?" he repeated sternly. I did not do it. "Then you plead innocent." "Yes, innocent." "Miss Doyle," he asked, with what I could have sworn with a slight smile on his lips, "do you desire to withdraw your claim to being a member of the crew? That is to say, do you wish to hide behind your father's name and avoid judgment by these men?" I turned slightly so as to consider the crew. They were gazing at me intently, but offered nothing to help. Though I sensed a trap in the question, I was loath to abandon my trust in the men, just when I needed them most. "Miss Doyle, do you wish to be judged by these men or not?" "I trust them," I said finally. "Do you wish to charge someone else with the act of murder?" "No," I said. "Let it thus be understood," Jaggery declared, "that the accused insists that she be judged by this court, and further charges no one else with the crime." So saying, he pulled a logbook onto his lap, and with a pen in hand, he wrote down my words. When done, he looked up. "Miss Doyle, do you agree that someone murdered Mr. Hollybrass?" "Yes." "Someone on the Seahawk?" "It has to be." "Exactly, someone on this ship, and at the moment you are the only one accused." "You have accused me." "But even the opportunity, Miss Doyle, you accused no one else. It was clear that this was a major point with him, and all I could reply was, yes. The captain made note in his book and then shifted his attention to the crew. Is there any man here who is willing to defend this prisoner? I turned to the men whom I had begun to call friends. Ewing, Barlow, Fisk. Not one of them would look at me. No one? The captain asked mockingly. No one. Very well, the captain went on. Miss Doyle, you'll have to defend yourself. They're frightened of you, I said. They won't speak because... Miss Doyle, he interrupted, is not my right, my responsibility as master of this ship to determine who used the knife and for what reasons? Yes, but... Again he cut in. Have I asked for anything but the truth? No. And a murder was committed by someone on this ship. That is not open to question. But have you so much as hinted that it was someone else? No, but Miss Doyle, although none of these men wishes to defend you, they have all sworn to speak the truth. Can you ask for anything more than that? Again I said nothing. Very well, we shall begin. He leaned back in his chair, logbook still in his lap, pen in hand, pistol at the ready. We have agreed that Mr. Hollybrass was murdered. Is there anyone here who believes he was killed by other than this weapon? He held up the dirk, and no one spoke. The captain continued. Let me now determine its ownership. Miss Doyle, he asked, do you recognize this knife? Captain Jaggery, I left it. Miss Doyle, he said again, do you recognize this knife? Captain Jaggery, was this the blade that killed Mr. Hollybrass? He repeated. Yes. Very well, then. I shall ask once more, do you recognize this knife? I do, I said reluctantly. Tell us about it. Zachariah gave it to me. Mr. Zachariah, he said, pretending to be surprised. Yes, and I showed it to you a few days into the voyage. But when you showed it to me, he quickly put in, and I asked you who gave it to you, what did you say? I said nothing. You told me a certain Mr. Grummage of Liverpool gave it to you. Am I correct? Captain Jaggery, answer the question. Yes or no? Yes. Are you saying now that you lied? Yes or no? Yes, I said, appealing to the crew, but only because I didn't want to wish to bring harm on Zachariah. Whatever your excuses, Miss Doyle, you admit you lied to me. Yes, I was forced to say, and you said I should keep the knife. Indeed, I told you that, and you did keep it, didn't you? Yes, I said sullenly, sensing that he was getting the best of me. He turned to the crew. Did any of you see this girl with this knife in hand at any time? The men shifted uneasily. Come now, gentlemen, the captain barked. This is a court of law. All of you are required to speak the truth. You swore upon the Bible to do so, and I'll ask again, did any of you see this girl with the knife? The crew appeared to be looking every way but at the captain, and then I noticed Dillingham rub the back of his neck. The captain saw it too. Mr. Dillingham, he called out sharply, do you have something to say? Step forward, sir. Dillingham came forward awkwardly. What have you to say? I saw her with the knife, sir. When? Shortly after we set sail. Thank you, Mr. Dillingham. I applaud your forthrightness. Now then, did anyone else see her with the knife? Mr. Ewing? Ewing said as much as Dillingham. When pressed, so did Foley, and so did Mr. Johnson. The captain was now leaning over the rail, clearly enjoying himself. Did anyone not see her with the knife? He said dryly. No one spoke. I wish, he said, to state how unnatural it is for a girl to carry a knife. You have no reason to say unnatural, I objected. You even gave me one. Oh, did I? Yes, during the storm. And why did I? To cut away the rigging. To be sure, that was an emergency. By what reason did you have a knife when there was no emergency? To defend myself. Defend yourself? Against whom? Against what? Fearful of his traps, I was not sure what to say. Against what? He pressed. Did anyone threaten you, any of these men? No, not them. Well, who then? Come, speak up. You. Oh, how so? You struck me. Miss Doyle, I do strike members of the crew. It's common enough practice. He turned to the men. Have any of you ever known a captain who has not, from time to time, struck a member of the crew? Come now, speak up if you have. No one spoke. The captain turned back to me. But do they turn upon me with a knife? Is that what you're suggesting, Miss Doyle? That members of a crew have a right to assault the captain with a weapon? He had confused me again. Besides, he added, you had a knife on the first day of the voyage. Did you think I would strike you then? No, I believed you were a gentleman. Oh, so, Miss Doyle, you had the knife before you met me, did you not? Yes, I admitted. The captain smiled with obvious satisfaction. The knife, then, is clearly yours, and you were seen with it. You admit to all of this. He turned to the crew. Have any of you seen a knife in her hand other than during the first few days of the voyage? Step forward if you have. It was Grimes who did. Ah, Mr. Grimes, have you something to say? Begging your pardon, sir. I saw her. In what circumstances? I was teaching her to use a knife. Teaching her to use a knife, the captain repeated portentously. Yes, sir. When? Before the storm. And did she learn? Yes, sir. Was she good at it? Aye, she was uncommon good. Mr. Grimes, I ask you, did you ever hear of another girl who desired to learn the use of a knife? Grimes hesitated. Answer. No, sir. Do you think it's unnatural? Well, sir, I don't know, as if... Agree or disagree? He bobbed his head apologetically. Agree. Unnatural again, the captain proclaimed. Mr. Hollybrass was murdered during the hurricane. Did anyone see this girl on the deck during the storm? He looked at the crew. Anyone? There were few murmurs of yes. Mr. Barlow, I think you said yes. What was Miss Doyle doing? She's with the crew, sir, doing her part like we all was. And good work, too. Doing her part like we all was, the captain echoed in a mocking tone. Mr. Barlow, you're not young. In all your years, have you ever seen or ever heard of a girl who took up crew's work? No, sir, I never did. So then, is it not unusual? I suppose. You suppose. Might you say unnatural? That's not fair, I cried out. Unusual and unnatural are not the same. Miss Doyle, have you an objection? There was nothing unnatural in what I did, I insisted. Miss Doyle, let me then put the question to you. Have you ever heard of a girl joining a crew? I felt caught. Have you? No. So even you admit to that? Yes, but the captain turned to the crew. Is there anyone here who's ever heard of a girl doing what Miss Doyle has done? No one spoke. So what we have here is a girl who admits she owns a weapon that murdered Mr. Hollybrass, a girl who lied about where she got it, and a girl who was taught to use a blade and learned to use it, as Mr. Grimes would have said, uncommon well. A girl who we all agree is unnatural in every way she acts. Gentlemen, do we not, as natural men, need to take heed? Is it not our duty and our obligation to protect the natural order of the world? Once more he turned to me. Miss Doyle, Mr. Zachariah was a friend of yours. The best of friends. What happened to him? He was flogged, I murmured. And for the last time I appealed mutely to the crew, and they were all looking steadily at me. I asked you a question, Miss Doyle. What happened to Mr. Zachariah? He died, I said, flogged to death. Who flogged him? You did, unmercifully. Anyone else? Mr. Hollybrass. Mr. Hollybrass, why was Mr. Zachariah being flogged? There's no reason. No reason? Did he not take part in a mutiny? He had every right to... A right to mutiny? Yes. You yourself, Miss Doyle, in great fear, if I remember, informed me that a mutiny was about to occur. Mr. Zachariah was one of the participants. Yet you think it's unfair to flog him? You wanted to kill him. So you were angry at me, and I looked into his glinting eyes. Yes, I declared, deservedly so. And at Mr. Hollybrass? After a moment, I again said, yes. Mr. Zachariah was a particular friend of yours, was he not, Miss Doyle? Yes. A black man? He was my friend. So you resented his being given the punishment he deserved. It was so not deserved. Is murder an unnatural act, Miss Doyle? Yes. Is that the way you dress unnatural? Well, not for the work I do. And what work is that? As a member of the crew. Is being a crew member not unnatural for a girl? Unusual, I insisted, not unnatural. Your hair? I could not work with it long. Work? I'm one of the crew. Unnatural, he said. Unusual, said I. So we have you, Miss Doyle, the captain pressed on, an unnatural girl, dressing in unnatural ways, doing unnatural things, owning the very knife that killed Mr. Hollybrass. And Mr. Hollybrass was the man you disliked for flogging your particular black friend. You make it all seem wrong when it isn't, I cried out. He turned to the crew. Does anyone wish to make a statement on this girl's behalf? No one spoke. Miss Doyle, do you wish to say anything? My father. Miss Doyle, when we began, I offered you the opportunity of claiming the protection of your father, and you refused it then. Miserable, I could only bow my head. He turned to the crew. Does anyone wish to make a statement on this girl's behalf? No one spoke. Miss Doyle, he said, do you wish to say anything? Miserable, I could only shake my head. Very well, I must declare a verdict. He stood. As master of the Seahawk, it is my judgment that this unnatural girl, this Charlotte Doyle, is guilty of the crime of murdering Samuel Hollybrass. For a final time, he turned to the crew. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against this verdict? No one spoke. Miss Doyle, he said, have you anything to say on your behalf now? I did not do it. Miss Doyle, the facts have spoken otherwise. I wish to inform you that the penalty for such a crime is to be hanged by the neck from the yardarm. Within 24 hours, you will be hanged until you're dead. So saying, he brought down his pistol hard upon the rail. The trial was over. Charlotte Doyle, Chapter 19. Without another word, Captain Jaggery led me back to the hold and locked me in the brig. I turned from him, but I believe he stood there, considering me for a while by the gloomy light of his lamp. And then he left. I heard his retreating footfalls and the creak of the ladder, saw the light gradually fade away until the hold grew completely dark again. At last I slumped onto the stool, and though it was dark, I closed my eyes. Startled by a sound, I looked up. Zachariah, a candle in his hand, was standing before me. Silently he circled the brig and pulled out the bars. I crept from my cage, and we sat down close together, backs once more against a barrel, the little candle before us. I told him all that had happened. He remained silent, nodding now and again. By the time I was done, I was weeping copiously. Zachariah let me sob. He waited for my last sniffle, then asked, How much time does he give you? 24 hours, I murmured. Charlotte, he said softly, he'll not see it through. He does what he says he'll do, I said bitterly. You said as much yourself, and he has the whole crew agreeing with his judgment. He was that careful. Punctilious, I spat out, remembering the word the captain had used to describe himself. I don't know that word. Everything in order. Ah, that's him. Zachariah rubbed the stubble around his chin. And did no one stand up for you? He asked. No one. He shook his head. It's that I don't understand. I looked up. Don't you? And for the first time I felt my anger turn toward him. Why? Have they not become your friends? I have no friends. You must not say that, Charlotte. Didn't I tell you from the beginning, you and me, together? I shook my head at the memory. What's this, he said, trying to laugh my response away. We're not friends? Zachariah, I burst out, I'm going to be hanged. He made a gesture of dismissal. You won't. How can you be so sure? I won't let him. You? You'd have to show yourself. What about your plan to go to the authorities? I'll give it up. After all that's happened? Yes. I don't believe you. Charlotte, why should you say that? When I kept silent, he said, Come now, Charlotte, something else is preying on your thoughts, something bitter. You must have it out. Don't tell me that I must and must not do, I cried. That's for Jaggery. Forgive me, the old black man humbly requests you tell him what's beset your mind. Zachariah, you haven't told me the truth. He turned to look hard at me. You must explain yourself. I retreated to the brig. He pulled himself closer, pressing his face to the bars. Charlotte, he insisted, now I truly am begging, tell me what you mean. Zachariah, I said tearful again, I know who killed Mr. Hollybrass. Then why didn't you speak out so I can hear? He said sharply. I'm waiting for him to say it himself, I threw back. He sighed. That's an old seaman's saying, Miss Doyle. The devil will tie any knot, save the hangman's noose. That Jack does for himself. Your silence is foolish. I beg you. Who do you think it is? I pressed my lips tight. Miss Doyle, he said, if you want to save your life, you'll tell me. I'm trying to help you, but I cannot manage it without your thoughts. You have some choices, Miss Doyle. Should I make them clear? Do you prefer to dangle from the yardarm by your neck, or do you wish to walk free? What do you want, Miss Doyle? To live. He sighed. Then speak. Mr. Zachariah, I said with increasing weariness, I already told you. I want the man to come forward himself. Most unlikely. Apparently, I said with even greater bitterness. Something in my voice must have alerted him. He scrutinized me shrewdly. Miss Doyle, why are you calling me Mr. Zachariah? For the same reason you're calling me Miss Doyle. He cocked his head to one side, and I could feel his gaze upon me. For a moment I had the courage to return it, but quickly glanced away. He said, Charlotte, you've grown suspicious of me. Am I correct? I nodded. Look at me. I did. He sighed again. Is it truly possible you think that I murdered Mr. Hollybrass? And after a moment I admitted, yes. And why? Zachariah, you were there on the deck. You had every reason to want him dead. And since I've told you you knew where I'd left the dirk, I suppose you would have preferred to kill the captain, but thought the first mate would do. And no one would know, would they? Least of all Jaggery. I'm certain that's what the rest of the crew believes, I rushed on. And that's why they wouldn't speak for me. It's to protect you, Zachariah, just as they've done all along. I can hardly blame them. I sank to the floor sobbing. For quite a time Zachariah didn't speak, and the longer he remained silent, the more certain I was that I had uttered the truth. Charlotte, he said at last, if you believed all that, why did you not say so before? Because you're the only one. You told me so yourself, and I believe you. You're the only one who can get off the Seahawk when we reach Providence and go to the authorities about Captain Jaggery. And that's why you said nothing? Yes. It does you honor, he said very quietly. I don't care about honor, I declared. I'd much rather live, but the least you could do is be honest with me. He hesitated and then said, Charlotte, you do not have it correct. Well, I don't suppose I know everything. Charlotte, he said with the utmost solemnity, I did not kill Mr. Hollybrass. I eyed him suspiciously. Charlotte, he continued, we shall either live by believing one another, or by not believing, die. I want to believe you. I do. I sank back down on the stool. For a long while neither of us spoke. There seemed nothing to say. And then in despair I said, Zachariah, sometimes I think Jaggery has worked all this out so that you and I should blame one another. But you said he doesn't know you're alive. He started. Repeat what you just said. What? The last thing. About his not knowing you're alive? Yes. He moved from the brig then and sat down. His mood completely changed, and after a while he murmured, Charlotte? What? When I was on the deck during the storm, Jaggery saw me. His words sank in slowly. Zachariah, are you telling me the captain knows you're alive, but he's done nothing? Yes. When did he see you? I demanded. As I say, during the storm, I was on deck trying to reach the main mast. Is that before or after you helped me? He thought a moment. Before. Yes, I was bending to the wind, doubled over, when I heard voices arguing. I couldn't make 'em out at first, and then I saw Captain Jaggery and Mr. Hollybrass. It was they who were arguing, furiously. I heard Mr. Hollybrass accuse the captain of deliberately taking the Seahawk into the storm. Jaggery was enraged. I thought he was about to strike the man. And then the first mate took himself off while the captain turned toward me. At first he didn't recognize me, only swore, as I did. But then, what did he do? Nothing. He just, in a wild sort of way, stared. Mind the storm was growing worse, but before he could do or say anything, I headed for the foremast, where I chanced to be, where you needed me. Didn't you wonder after the storm he did nothing? Charlotte, you yourself told me when I helped you on the mast that you thought I was a ghost, an angel perhaps. Think of Jaggery. If ever a man had guilty deeds locked in his thoughts, deeds enough to raise the dead from 7 seas, he would be the one. When after the storm he did nothing, I decided that was exactly what he thought, that I was an apparition. His leaving me here was proof enough. How else to explain it? And therefore I was safe. I gazed at him through the bars, trying to grasp the full import of what he was saying. Zachariah, I said slowly, trying to sort out my tumbling thoughts, during the trial he made a point of asking me what happened to you. And you answered? Oh, to make sure he didn't know, I said you died. But Zachariah, if he did know you to be alive, he might also guess that we all knew it, and might think exactly as I did that you killed Mr. Hollybrass. But he didn't say, so as to condemn you. Only with me gone could he turn on you. He could not do it the other way around for fear of my going to the authorities, as I threatened to do. Do you think he knows who really killed Mr. Hollybrass? He might. But who? Zachariah grew thoughtful. To kill a hand during a storm when everyone is desperately needed takes a kind of madness, he said finally. Well then, I said, who does that leave? We looked at one another and knew. The captain, I said. It must have been he who killed Mr. Hollybrass. Charlotte, Zachariah protested, Mr. Hollybrass was Jaggery's only friend. Yes, people would think them friends. No one would believe it could be Captain Jaggery. But you told me they never sailed together before, and I never saw much friendship between them, did you? No. You said they argued, I continued. I saw some of that too. In the storm, you even thought Captain Jaggery lifted a hand to strike him after Mr. Hollybrass made an accusation of deliberately sailing into the storm. Is that a serious charge? The owners would be greatly alarmed. But to kill him? Zachariah, he sees you. He knows you're alive. The crew, he realizes, must know it too. I'm a threat to him, and so are you. And now, here's Mr. Hollybrass, another threat. But let him murder Mr. Hollybrass, and everyone will think that you did the crime. But then he accuses you, Zachariah said. And see how much he's managed, I cried. Zachariah stared into the dark, and then slowly he said, The crew keeps silent to protect me, even as he hangs you. To which I added, And once I'm gone, Zachariah, then he'll deal with you. Zachariah grew thoughtful, and finally I heard him whisper, May the gods protect us. The excitement of our discovery ebbed. We sat in silence. In time, the candle went out. What, I asked ruefully, can we do about any of this? Charlotte, we must force him to confess. Oh, he's too powerful. True. You'll not get any man to confess when he holds a gun and you've got none. What do you mean? Charlotte, see what happened when we rose against him before? You've been in his quarters, haven't you? You must have seen that iron safe of his that's full of muskets. You're not likely to get into that. No one knows where he keeps the key. I reached out and plucked at his arm. Zachariah? I know where he keeps it.